Today's episode is brought to you by Red Cat Coffee House and their Landmark Series coffees. As a cat lover, I could not resist but introduce you specifically to this blend called Light Rails. It features a cat on the label, but not only that, each blend features a landmark, is inspired by a landmark of the city. This one is inspired by our vibrant Rainbow Tunnel downtown, and it has sweet fruits and mixed berries. You can find the Landmark series, including blends like Ironworks, Full Steam Ahead, Alabama Audubon, and Johns Valley Trail, either online, at Red Cat locations, or your local Piggly Wiggly. It's coffee with a story, and even with a feline charm. From Where to Here is independently produced by me, Alexandra Lloyd, crafted with curiosity, culture, and a little bit of coffee. Hi, I'm Alexandra Lloyd, a French-Canadian who's called Birmingham, Alabama home since 2017. Welcome to From Where to Here, the podcast that celebrates the rich diversity of languages, cultures, and the stories that connect us all. Each month, I'll sit down with inspiring guests from different backgrounds to explore their cultures, languages, and tackle some fun in our Truth, Dare, or Debunk segment. Whether you're a language enthusiast, a culture lover, or just curious about the world, you're in the right place. Let's dive into your next favorite cultural adventure. Learning a language as an adult sometimes seems impossible. I know for myself even, it's been difficult to at times think of, okay, could I learn another language? Could I really learn the way I intended to and speak fluently, right? We have kind of that conception about what speaking fluently a language is, or at least I have for a very, very long time. And there's just already that perception that many people have when learning a new language. Whether it's a language that you hear often, that you're exposed to without necessarily speaking it, or whether that's a language that is only spoken in a country that's very far from where you live. And we do think that way as adults. Kids are just sponges, right? Just pick up on every words, and it seems very easy because our brain is still in development. And I was given that example one time, and I think it's a great example where if you have a baby, you're gonna give the bottle of milk and say, hey, this is milk, but hey, here's your milk. The visual, there's the sound, the auditive, and there's the context that just makes it easy for the baby to pick up on the words, because there's also the aspect of repetition that comes into play where this probably happens once a day, if not more. So all of these elements contribute to making it faster for the baby or the kid to pick up on the language. And I know as adults, we have busy lives and we have busy schedules, we already have our habits that are set in a way, and it's hard to get away from those. It's hard to incorporate new ones. I think we all struggles with that. But I really think that there is a way to get through learning a language with our busy lives and as adults especially. As adults, we have so many other benefits that sometimes we tend to forget about. And one of it is you master a language already. And what's a better way to use that language that you already know to help you learn a new one? And we're going to talk about that. You have so many experiences in your life that will help you also pick up on that other language that you're trying to learn. Another thing is that you are more focused on the process of learning a new language. And that's important, because as a kid, you may not have cared. If you were put in a class to learn another language, that might have been something that you were just doing because you had to. So in this episode, I want to talk with you about ways to go through the struggles of learning a new language, but also all of the benefits and really the joys of learning a new language can bring you into your life. Before we do that, I have compiled some myths, because there are many myths about learning a language, one language, many languages, and I want to dive into those. Now let's look at these. The myth number one, and this is probably the one that I hear the most: adults can't learn languages as well as children. And I briefly talked about it. From University of Kansas 2020, there has been a study made, and it says that while kids pick up pronunciation more naturally, research shows adults excel in other areas such as vocabulary, grammar, acquisition, both vocabulary and grammar acquisition. In addition to that, adults also bring existing language skills, which we were just talking about, and cognitive skills, how your brain will think, pay attention, and just kind of process all of this, process information. That makes any adults highly effective learners. Now that this has been said and even proven by research, you can forget about giving this as an excuse. Myth number 2. Learning takes too long. Adults often believe they don't have the years it takes to master a language. That's a good one too. We all have fallen to those myths, right? And telling ourselves, giving excuses, that's really what it comes down to. However, studies highlight that setting realistic goals, like conversational fluency, which they qualified in this study as B2 for those who are into the numbering, that's not something I personally pay attention to, because whenever I set goals for myself in learning a language, I'm specific about more the context and the topics that I want to learn and be able to speak about. And to me, that has more value than a number attributed to, which is used, for those who are less familiar with that, they're used in grading you when you pass certain exams. I do think the benefit of having an understanding of where you fall with these is that it gives you some structure. Okay, so studies highlight that setting realistic goals, such as conversational fluency, can be achieved in months with focused practice. The CEFR, which stands for the Common European Framework of Reference for Languages, estimates that achieving intermediate proficiency in many languages takes around, I'll let you guess, how many months of consistent study does it take to be fluent? For English speakers, we're talking as an native English speakers, how long would that take? It breaks it down by different languages, and I think that's great because I don't think all languages has the same level of difficulty. For instance, French and Spanish are both romantic languages. There's a lot of similarities, but even English has some similarities with French in a way, or you Anglophones use our French words in many ways and don't even realize it in your day-to-day. I can think of an impression of déjà vu, or which is funny for me to say a word that is French with an English accent, such as this one. Okay, I need to do a little parentheses on something that's really also funny to me as a native French speaker. When I say a parentheses, that really refers to a tangent. And a tangent, in English you use the word tangent, and there might be other synonyms. It's going off the main topic, the main point temporarily, but with the intention of returning to it. So whenever we do a parentheses, it's just like, hey, as a side note, and then going back to the main topic. And this is totally fine, and I find myself now using it the same way Americans say it, is certain words such as baguette, fries, you would add the word French baguette. We need to go buy a French baguette, like a side of French fries with my burger. I just call them fries. I just call this a baguette. But again, I find myself now kind of calling them French fries just because that's how I will best be understood. If I ask specifically for French fries, I want the thin ones. I don't want the fatty ones. That's always funny to me. Okay, let's come back to this. The average time to consistently study in order to learn a language as an English speaker is between 6 and 9 months. Let's just pause here for a moment. I truly believe this. I want to share with you what has been my best learning experience when talking about languages. That was with Spanish, and it was during a specific period of time, and that was back in 2022 that I started for 7 months. It was a total of about 29, I don't know why 29, but 20 something sessions, but I think I didn't get up to 30 sessions of 1 hour with mi maestra in Guatemala. I had my teacher online, a tutor. My experience was mi maestra de Guatemala. Ella está en Guatemala, pero yo aprendido con ella en la línea. I'm learning with her online, my teacher, my tutor from the country of Guatemala, and we are interacting together online. She had kind of a curriculum that she was following, and I had exercises to do between sessions, and we will talk together during the session. Honestly, the most beneficial thing was to be able to speak with someone that can speak in return. which a conversation usually happens both ways, right? That was very, very helpful. And if you don't have the luxury to pay a tutor, which by the way, they are very affordable, and I'm happy to share which school I did that with. They are based in Guatemala. I think there are free apps out there that you can use to at least have that conversational practice with native speakers, no matter where you are in the world. And to get a little bit even more details, they estimate, the CEFR from 2023, they say Spanish, French, Italian, Portuguese requires between 600 and 750 hours. So they qualify these languages as easy. Second place, or for moderate or intermediate, you have Russian, Vietnamese, and Hebrew between 900 and 1,100 hours. And most difficult languages, can you take a guess? There's one that, obviously, okay, so there are a couple that I would have assumed, but one I would not have think of, and the one I would not have think of is Arabic. I know a lot of the people that speak Arabic also speak French. So, because when I went to Morocco, they spoke both languages, so I could get around in French. That was very convenient, but that's not one that I would have think of. The other ones are Mandarin, Chinese, Japanese, and Korean. The time estimated to consistently study to be able to speak fluently that one of those languages is over 2,200 hours. And there's a mention about having like structured study plans, which when I was doing a French tutor here in the Birmingham area, I always made sure that we had a structured plan, and I had kind of my own study plan that I like to follow to make sure we tap into all areas of learning a language. I really like that they mentioned that. And they said, per that study, it says 1 to 2 hours per day, vocabulary, grammar, speaking and listening, that type of exercises and practice, and also additional passive exposure. I really love that they mentioned that, because I'm a big believer in that active learning and passive learning. Active learning, it's when you communicate with someone. That's active learning because you're actually expressing yourself in the language. And then an example of passive exposure would be watching a show or listening to music, which I love listening to, like Spanish music. So these are other ways. They put language exchange of 30 minutes, from 30 minutes to an hour as a passive exposure. But that might be just watching or listening, kind of those audio kind of podcasts that you can listen to and you hear different people speaking, having a conversation. That would be also passive exposure. But if you're engaging in that language exchange, then it becomes active. To summarize, an easy language, it will take you, per this research, between 6 to 9 months, and a harder language between 2 and 3 years to become somewhat fluent. So 2, we're good. Myth number 3. You need, this one, I would hear it all the time. You need to live abroad to become fluent. No. You need to learn a language, have some basics, like basic foundations, before you go visit the country. Thanks to modern technology, immersing in a language is more accessible than ever. It's time for you to learn now. If you've been considering learning a language, there's no better time than starting today. Studies by the Modern Language Association from 2022 emphasizes that online tools, streaming media, and language exchange platforms create opportunities for immersion from anywhere in the world. Absolutely. We can already move on to the next one. Number 4, it's embarrassing to make mistakes as an adult. How many of you have felt too shy to speak because you were not sure if you were good enough? You thought, I don't know how to pronounce that. I'm not pronouncing this right. I don't know what words come after. What if I say something that will be offending? You're gonna make mistakes no matter what. You should just start making mistakes, so then you get comfortable with the idea of making mistakes, because you can't avoid them. You're gonna make them. They are crucial to the learning process, and that at any age. Linguistic research from Cambridge University, that was from 2021, underscores that adults who embrace trial and error retain new language structures more effectively. We just don't want to get out there, but it's inevitable. Also, native speakers are often supportive and encouraging when non-native learners make the effort to communicate. Now, some of you might say, or might think, well, I went to Montreal that time. They reply right away in English. That is very possible, especially if you went into the city where it's very much so easy to navigate in English without speaking French. That's simply because they were trying to make it, and I'm speaking for them right now because it happened to me before, but we tend to naturally be wanting to speak the language that we think you speak, but I think there's absolutely nothing wrong in putting your intention out there and saying, oh, I'm actually learning French, I'm practicing my French, would you mind if we keep speaking in that language? I mean, unless this person is in a hurry, I don't see why they would not say, of course, there's not a better time to start. And I hope you see the value of it. And whether you want to learn a language because you want to travel in a country that speak that language and that inspires you to speak the language because you want to deeply connect with the community there, which is one of my personal reasons. Oftentimes, I think there's not a better way to connect with someone when you speak their language. And whether it's just a few sentences, it goes a long way. It really does. It might be that you have a spouse that speaks the language and that motivates you because you want to maybe teach your kids that language, or maybe you want to connect with the in-laws when you go visit the family. It might be because your work gives you better opportunities if you speak a little bit of that language. And no matter what the reasons are, the value that you find in it is really what's going to drive you to do it. There are strategies that you can start implementing, and I want to talk a little bit more about these now that the myths are behind us. So let's dive in. Number 1, immersion. And this is a key word that I've been using. Contextual learning and immersion is really key. What type of environment are you learning, or what kind of context do you want to learn in? Based on, it might be your interests, it might be the actual scenarios that you will be using the language. If you're gonna go meet the in-laws, this is the type of environment that you're gonna be in. Why not reproducing that so you can effectively communicate in a type of verbiage that really align with who you're speaking to? The role plays are a good way to practice, but also first to look at. And what I mean by that, movies, the audio, some type of podcast where you can listen to a conversation happening, YouTube videos, whatever you can find that has that context that you're looking to immerse yourself would be beneficial for you to pick up on not only the words that are said, but also the nonverbal and even the tone of your voice and other areas like that you want to also pay attention. Number 2, language exchange partners. There has never been an easier time to find those, no matter where you are. Thanks to the apps out there, they are free, most of them. There are some paid features typically you can access for just additional things that makes it handy, such as like translating a message that you wrote or that the person sent you. But in terms of just having a conversation, it's free. You just need to sign up, have an account, and then you just get to decide who you want to have a conversation with. And if I can give one tip from having done many of those, is set the intention of what you want to get out of this session, especially if you get to the point where you have multiple language exchange partners, to just say, hey, today I'm trying to focus on this area and this is a topic I'd like to practice when it's the time that we speak the language that I'm learning, the targeted language. Because oftentimes how this works is you have the other person that is a native speaker in your targeted language and vice versa. If you do a 30-minute session, you're gonna do, let's say, 15 minutes in English, which is your native language, and then 15 minutes in Spanish, if that's a language you're starting to learn. To make it as optimal as possible, you could have some predetermined topics and not just always talk about how was your day, what did you do, that kind of thing. Number 3, language learning apps and communities. So a little similar. Now, if you are lucky to have local native speakers that you can converse with, by all means, go get coffee and go take a walk, go hike, go do whatever that you want to do. Just regular activities, but make sure you speak the target language. And again, an exchange between the two where you speak a language and then you speak the other. That's a great way to practice. If you have that luxury, go and do it as often as you can. Number 3, language learning communities and apps. Now, I've already talked a little bit about it. There are many out there. I love the one that focus on speaking the language, because I believe many learners, what they don't do enough is to speak. We all naturally seek a certain level, to not say perfection, but a certain level of fluency before having the confidence to speak. And the confidence comes by you speaking the language. And when I say speaking, is the confidence come by making mistakes. The confidence come by putting yourself out there and giving what you have, giving what you know. And it's not going to be perfect. It might not even make sense, the sentence that you're making, but the goal of communicating how you know you have passed the message across is if the other person understands. And if the other person understands, you have communicated successfully. That's good enough. You're good enough. And then online communities, in the sense that there are some forums that you can ask questions. I've been part of some Facebook groups. I find them helpful if I have a very specific questions to ask, and that's always come handy. Now, if you're just starting out, apps such as the one that you learn short sentences and then you repeat after, this one could be good, but I think it becomes very saturated pretty quickly. And if your goal is to speak, I would really focus at least 60% of your learning on speaking. On speaking either to yourself in front of the mirror, putting sentences about describing what you're doing as you're doing it. If every morning you drink a cup of coffee, well, get in the habit of describing that you're drinking a cup of coffee or that you're making a cup of coffee, and saying it out loud is key. You don't want to just say it in your head because you want to hear your own words, you want to hear your pronunciation. Recording is really good too. Record yourself saying some things and then rewatch it, and then try to improve little aspects of it, but it all comes with practice. It's like anything. One of my favorite, not because it's fun, but just because it's necessary, and it's to set realistic goals. Because it's one thing to be, oh yeah, I'm gonna be learning this and that, and I'm gonna be speaking, and I'm gonna be writing, doing some fill the blanks, and watching TV every day in my targeted language, and I'm gonna listen to music during my commute and those videos, and that's all great. But what is the goal? What are you trying to do here? 7 months, it's a long time. If you are really serious about this, 7 months, it's a long time. Maybe you have a goal for the first month. What do you want to accomplish? And try to have those small wins spread out that supports the bigger strategy, that supports the overall goal you're trying to achieve. What inside drives you? What's your motivation? Like, your why should be what you start with. And that should be the overall goal that you're trying to achieve long term. And then what are you doing to support that? If you're not familiar with SMART goals, get familiar, because these are just very actionable steps to describe what you want. Now, maybe you're just starting out, vocabulary, it's a place you gotta know what the words are before forming sentences. So maybe you want to learn 10 new words a day. Maybe you want to be able to describe short activities that you do every day and be able to describe them like you're telling a story to someone. Maybe you want to be able to conjugate the verbs to have and to be, which are two foundational. And one thing you need to keep in mind is the vocabulary. You might think, well, it's a lot of words that I need to learn to be able to bring it in the different situations, but we reuse a lot of the same words in any languages. Start with the top 1,000 words in your targeted language. That's gonna make your life easier. Side note, for the 1,000 words, that's really the total of words that you might end up using as part of your learning and you conversing in the targeted language. But really, if you're just starting out learning vocabulary words, I highly suggest you start small. Start with 100 and then increase to a chunk of 100, another 100, or maybe even just 50. Start small, and that might be 10 or 20 words a day. Per week, you might reach the 50 words or a total of 100 new words each week, depending on your cadence and the schedule that you put together for yourself. Now, leveraging context, cultural context to learn faster. I think this one is especially relevant once you have learned some of the vocabulary words. You can express yourself, but even getting interested in that early on could really impact positively your learning experience, because what that means is understanding from a society standpoint, the culture, the norms that shape that culture, if that makes sense. Understanding the individuals, how they behave as a whole, and what drives them, and the things that are not taught in school. I think the more you either hang out with people from that culture that you're trying to learn the language from, or the more that you maybe watch videos on YouTube about how they live their life. And I have it right here. How is defined the cultural context? And it says that it's related to the society where individuals are raised in and at how the culture affects behavior. It incorporates values that are learned and attitudes that are shared among groups of people. It includes beliefs, meanings, customs, ideas, language, norms. By you having the interest to go a little deeper and understand above the language what's out there and what shapes really how these individuals think and behave, and what are their motivations, what are their pain points, like for them to act a certain way. So it kind of encompasses all of those behaviors and all of those attitudes. Understanding expressions and slang. The best advice I have to give you on this one is to decide. So let's say you want to learn Spanish, which is my favorite language. I had to ask myself, what kind of Spanish do I want to learn? And it's not necessary, but it's helpful. The reason is because there are some slangs, some expressions that each of these communities will have. So I'll give you an example, or kind of how I did it, is I listened to different accents. I went on YouTube, I searched for different accents, and I just did my own research about that. There's the accent in the Caribbean, like Puerto Rico. There's also in Spain, they speak Spanish, but it's kind of like that old Spanish that I would compare to the Québécois French, the French in Quebec, because of the colonization that happened years and years ago. And that made it where we kind of started on our own slang, that small community, away from all the other French colonies, just because we were isolated. Which French in France, it's more similar in that slang because they're all closer to each other, if that makes sense. I have a friend here in Birmingham, she's from Toulouse, and she pronounced her R very much so compared to another French person that's from Marseille. So it varies greatly, and I think the one that you would notice, the slang or even the accent that you will notice the most, would be greatly impacted to where they reside. So that makes sense with the Puerto Rican accent because they're kind of more secluded. And then Mexican Spanish and Colombian Spanish. I think there's two that I personally think they are easy to understand, but they each have some slang that is different, expressions that they use. I think the car, they say different words. I can't even think of what it is right now, but there are some differences. Just being aware of those differences, and if you pinpoint one specific language, but also a country that you want to learn from, but sometimes it's even more of a community. I know in France, obviously you have so many different variations of French because of that. So just pinpointing which one you want to learn will help you tremendously. And then you can just build on the different variations for specific words that other countries might use. The last one is one that I personally enjoy deeply learning about, and it's the cultural aspects that are tied to the language. You might think of the food, the festivals, they all have their own way of cooking. You can learn a lot about that, whether it's the spices that are added. That makes me think, recently I did a New Zealand recipe, which is basically called dukkha, for those who knows. It is something that you dip your bread in. It's a mix of different spices, white sesame seeds, and celery salt, garlic salt, all kind of seasoning. You basically take your bread, dip it in olive oil, and then dip it in the dukkha. I had a Zoom call with someone from New Zealand. She had a beautiful accent, and I did have to ask her the most random ask, but I had to ask her if she eats dukkha and if it's common or if it's just something I read in my magazine. And she said, oh yeah, we have it all the time. And I was just so excited about it because I enjoy it myself. And now I feel like I just brought a little bit more of that New Zealand culture into my day-to-day. And at my table, really. Just getting interested in those aspects can really enhance your overall experience with the language and with the learning process of the language. At the end, not only you will learn a second language, maybe a third, and let me tell you, it becomes easier after you have learned more than one language. You will be able, you have that mental agility that just, your brain just thinks differently. I think it just opens up so many doors. It allows you to connect with others in the way that you would have never thought it was even possible. How proud would you be of yourself for doing that? It's definitely a great challenge to give you, but something to be invested in. You'll find many benefits, I'm sure. Having your personal motivation also goes a long way. Story time! Story time! I forgot I really wanted to share with you story fragments of my life about language learning. So here are the 5 stories related to language learning. First, last, best, worst. And maybe I'll share the weirdest. Okay, let's start with the first. So first time I learned a new language, I was about 8-9 years old, and I guess quatrième année. In the US, I think you call that 4th grade, which is like primary school. It's 1, 2, 3, 4, 4th grade, primary school. The system, it works differently for us back home, so I'm always confused. That's why I go by the age. But I was 8 years old, I believe, when I started learning Spanish. And that was at school. That was even before I ever was introduced to English. And I had such a great experience. My teacher was amazing. I remember taking those school pictures with her, and she was my favorite teacher, and I thought she was so pretty, and I thought she was just great at what she does, and she made just learning so easy and fun. I just really was into that class. Probably my favorite class at the time. Now the last language I've learned is ASL, American Sign Language, which funny enough, I learned the Canadian version, which I believe we called ASL at the time. I cannot think exactly when that was, but it was, I was really young, and and that wasn't like formal at all, and that wasn't at school. So, I don't know, I've always been really involved in all kind of extracurricular activities, so that might be just one of them. I'll have to ask my mom, to be honest. But I remember fire, so you do flames around fire. Small interruption here. In case you can only listen to me and you cannot visually see my hands, I simply had my palms open towards the ceiling, and my hands would open every time I go up with one hand, and then at the same time my other hand would go down. One hand's up, one hand down, and simply opening and closing my fingers, and kind of just wiggling my fingers. When my left hand is up, my right hand is down, and then just go back and forth like this. Hopefully that makes sense. If not, you can just check out on YouTube to get a visual. So we had learned some type of sentence in sign language, and I still remember that up to today, but that's the only part I remember. I think if I would be exposed again to that sentence or story that we've learned, I would pick it back up. But this past year, and I got to learn ASL. I went in person, so there's a church locally that offers it. It's free, and it's given by actual deaf individuals. It's really lovely, a great experience. I have done it because my sister, one of my sister-in-laws, she got really into it. She is so good at it now, and very inspired by her story. I went there with her mom, also went to the class, and the cousin of my husband and her daughter. So we were a small group attending. It was a lot of fun. Now, best is when I was learning Spanish, but I had very specific goals that I've set myself. And I also focus on the speaking. I had mi maestra en Guatemala para 29 semanas para aprender, para conversar con ella. About 29 weeks that I was learning Spanish with my teacher in Guatemala, and that has been the most beneficial out of all the time that I spent actively learning Spanish. And I found myself just being very fluent in scenarios that I didn't expect I will. And then I traveled to Colombia for the first time with my Colombian friend and Mexican friend. The hubby was also there, I forgot to mention. And we had a blast, and I just had so much fun just conversing with local people. That was the reward I gave myself at the end of this journey. Now, worst, I don't know that I really have one. I think any language experiences that I've had has been enriching one way or another. So maybe, I mean, if I have to say anything, I would say probably just learning on the app that doesn't make it as much focus on interacting with someone and it's solely on vocabulary. You always want to keep the learning to an extent that is difficult enough so you're really actively engaging your brain is really working hard, and not something so easy that it's like you kind of just go with the flow. And in order to do that, I really think you need to have that conversational aspect, or even the reading a book, writing, that keeps it high enough. When you think you got this, then go a notch more difficult. Okay, now the weirdest, it's really weird, and it took me a moment to think of that one. It's not officially a language. In French, we call it a verlan, which is a coded language, and that's something my friends and I had a ton of fun doing. We will speak in that coded language where you add two syllables after each syllables. For instance, in French, I would say, I'm gonna call you tomorrow. In normal French, you will say, je vais t'appeler demain. But in coded language, that verlan slang language, you would say je regue, verregue, taraga, perregue, leregue, deregue, meregue. Makes the sentence longer, but it also confused whoever is listening to you. And it was priceless. Now, what's your weirdest experience with language learning? I'd love to hear from you. I hope you found this helpful, and today is the best day to start, so don't wait any longer. Just to end this, or before I let you go, I want to share a quote with you that I personally like and that I would share with my Be Frenchy students back in the days, and it is, when you have confidence, you can have a lot of fun. And when you have fun, you can do amazing things. The confidence comes from within. And that quote is from Jonah Math. You gotta put yourself out there, and this is how the confidence will come. You gotta make those mistakes. You gotta capture as many of those mistakes in little boxes, because the more you get, then the more wins you're gonna get. It's like the boxes of no's. You get no's for asking all these things to finally get a yes, but you gotta collect all those no's before you get to that yes box. It's the same thing with those mistakes. The more mistakes you make, the more you will learn from them, and the more wins you will be able to celebrate. Go out there, pick your language, do it for all the reasons that make sense to you. Just be proud of putting yourself out there, because life is about fun. Life is about doing amazing things, and you got this. You can do whatever you put your mind to. Thank you for tuning in to From Where to Here. If you enjoyed this episode, be sure to hit subscribe, leave a review, and share it with someone who loves discovering new cultures. Follow us on Instagram at From Where to Here Pod for exclusive updates, behind the scenes moments, and a peek at upcoming guests. Until next time, keep learning, keep connecting, and keep celebrating the beauty of languages and cultures. À bientôt!